Last time on Darkcore Frontiers. Aboard the hijacked SS Horizon, the young Zraynian stowaway Nex is caught in a deadly crossfire as advanced pirate technology clashes with the supply ship's AI defenses. As Nex grapples with a moral dilemma, flee or fight, the Horizon transforms into a death ship of combat droids, and Nex finds himself face-to-face with the ship's brutal security system. Darkcore Frontiers, Season 1, The Stowaway, by Thomas Chase. Episode 4, Distress Beacon. Nex backed slowly away from the security droid.
DC, shut this thing down,
he whispered, hoping his bot could still hear him. Nothing happened.
DC!
The security droid's wide-staring optical sensors jittered. Its weapons remained trained on him.
Unauthorized command. Request denied.
Nex squeezed his eyes shut, waiting to get blasted. But nothing happened. Then the ship's alarms just stopped. Nex squinted open one eye. Was he still alive? The droid's eyes went dark. The weapons retracted into its chassis, and the stubby robot slumped to one side. Nex stood in the silent ship.
DC, return to base.
DC floated around the corner.
Where were you?
DC just hummed. Nex glanced around. The camera's activation lights were off. What happened? DC hadn't done this. Nex took out his data pad. When he tried to log back into the ship's central server, his universal passcode was rejected. The hijackers must have bought enough time to get into the computers and take down the ship's security. Great. They had seized control of the SS Horizon again. Now they would waste no time locking the ship down tight. To make everything worse, they probably figured out someone turned on the ship's AI, which meant they were going to be hunting for whoever did it, aka Nex. On the bright side, he wasn't dead yet, and with the cameras offline, he had a few minutes to move around before they could track him down. Now all bets were off. If these hijackers were looking for him, they would find him. And after taking out half of their crew, Nex was pretty sure they wouldn't be in a forgiving mood. It was time to find a lifeboat and get out of there. He moved swiftly toward the lifeboat bay, past deactivated droids littering the corridor. When he passed a ship's terminal, he stopped. One thing bugged him: the delivery failure errors that had popped up on the ship's central server when they reactivated the security defenses. Nex was kind of busy at the time, so he didn't really think about it, but the SS Horizon should have sent out a distress beacon. In case of a breach, the standard beacon on all automated ships was programmed to blast out to the Space Authority's network of faster-than-light communication hubs. If the distress beacon actually went through, some patrol ship should have showed up by now.
DC, get into the system and manually trigger the distress beacon.
The bot plugged into the system. Hacking by the initial security wall, he toggled past various readouts. Then a flashing error code stopped DC's progress. F.431. Critical failure detected in power distribution unit. Fuse F3, 20 amps, overload. Immediate maintenance required.
Try again.
DC tried again. The error repeated. Nex drummed his fingers on the console. The hijackers must have smashed up the distress beacon when they first broke in. It made sense. The first thing they would do is wreck anything that could call the Space Authority. Even DC couldn't repair busted hardware on the fly. It looked like his time hacking his way around the SS Horizon was done. It was time to get his butt in gear and move. He struck out for the ship's aft lifeboat bay, one of 4 small emergency exit bays situated in different sections. Each was stocked with a number of lifeboats, a manual airlock, and a variety of strapped-down emergency equipment for fire, medical, or external ship repairs. Nex pulled open the manually operated hatch cover, and a small dome light sprang on inside the cramped 3-seated lifeboat. He was pulling off his backpack to lug it inside the cockpit when his eyes fell onto a set of open-faced lockers across the room. In each hung a bulky red EVA suit. Nex stopped. Wait a second. There was still one way to get off the SS Horizon and send out that distress beacon. He leaned against the wall, trying to get his brain to focus. It was called space hopping. He'd seen people do it tons of times. On most manned ships, part of their job was to pop out the airlock in radiation-shielded EVA suits to do routine maintenance. And sometimes, they even jumped from one ship to another. Nex had never actually done it himself, though, and if he messed up, he would be on his own out there. But if it worked, he could sneak over to one of the other ships, hit that distress button, and then book it to the planet in a lifeboat.
We have to try it, DC.
He pulled the suit off the rack and looked it over. It was big, but he could make it work. Then he noticed the oxygen tank slot was empty. He looked around and dug through another equipment locker, but couldn't find any spares. Because of course not. When was anything ever easy? Nex took out his portable respirator. With an adapter he had in his backpack, he was able to attach the respirator's output valve to the suit's oxygen input port. He pulled off his boots and stuffed them in his backpack, lifted the suit up over his arms and shoulders, and the thick helmet over his head.
Come on. In you go, DC.
DC blinked and lowered into the backpack. His lights dimmed as he went into standby mode. Nex zipped the backpack. With the respirator secured, he checked the suit's battery pack. It was fully charged. Nex switched on the temperature controls, grabbed a tether line and his backpack, and clunked up the ladder into the airlock depressurization chamber. The door rolled closed behind him, and the latches snapped. His fingers tapped the controls, initiating the depressurization sequence. Nex's helmet filled with the heavy roar of air. His heart was pounding out of his chest. To keep his mind off of it, he tied his backpack to his belt straps with a strong knot and double-checked the respirator settings. This whole setup was risky, but he tried not to think about it. The trip would probably wipe out his respirator's oxygen supply, but it was his best shot at reaching the other ship. The chamber faded into silence as the pressure equalized. The outer door swung open into the yawning blackness beyond the airlock. Nex felt sudden weightlessness as the ship's artificial gravity lost hold of him. His boots clamped onto the ladder, keeping him from drifting out. He moved his arms and legs, which were now puffed out with internal pressure. Everything seemed functional, but like moving through water. Closing his eyes and forcing a dry swallow, he climbed up out of the airlock. Outside the SS Horizon, the dark canopy of terrifying galaxies stretched above him across a stunningly dark void. To his right, the hulking silhouette of the ship stretched out in the light of the distant sun. His breath was taken away by the sheer size of everything out here. The ship's staggering gray and white hulk shone in the starlight, marred by occasional sparkling flashes from space debris. The ship's exterior lights cast long shadows across its surface. From where he was floating, he couldn't see where the hijackers had docked their ship. Everything looked normal. To his left, another supply ship in the fleet floated serenely. It was similar in design to the Horizon, with a matte, utilitarian build. The ship's name, SS Endeavor, was stenciled on its side in bold orange lettering. At first, Nex was surprised by the immense gulf between the two ships. Maybe this whole space-hopping thing wasn't his brightest idea. But then he could just see that its tiny docking bay was open, a faint glimmer across the void.
All right, Nex. Get it together.
He told himself. It was just a little jump between spaceships, in the middle of nowhere. What could go wrong? Probably a million things. But nope. He was not going to think about that. Just don't look down, or up, or anywhere, really. Nex took a deep breath through the respirator, switched off his magnetic boots, and crouching at the knees, gave himself a good push. The vacuum enveloped him as he floated away from the SS Horizon. He gave a little shot of the EVA suit's thrusters. He was actually doing this. Moving through open space was electrifying. His breathing was so loud inside his helmet, it was like being sucked into a cyclone. The staggering views of the multicolored planets around him, the feeling of a lack of control over his own motion, and the size of the cherry-colored planet as it became visible underneath his feet, made him feel like a drifting piece of dust. As Nex moved further from the SS horizon, he started to tilt to one side at a crazy angle. He tried to straighten himself with puffs from his propulsion unit, but with his lack of experience, he only rotated upside down. So he decided to leave it alone before he got himself into worse trouble. In 0G, his brain told him the ships were rotating upward. He got so dizzy that for a minute he lost track of the docking bay light. He could see the enormous curves of the other supply ships forming a loose cluster. His progress was slow but steady. Each burst from the thrusters nudged him closer. The EVA suit's heads-up display flashed readouts of his velocity, distance, and suit integrity. Nex's eyes flicked between the HUD and his target, and he made small adjustments. An alert flashed in the corner of his vision, indicating a gradual drop in his respirator's oxygen levels. He couldn't stay out there much longer, but if he sped up, he might lose control. As Nex approached the second supply ship, he activated the tether's magnetic clamp. The clamp latched onto the ship's hull. A sudden wave of relief rolled over him. He looked at his oxygen supply. It was down to 14%, and the numbers ticked down as he watched them. He took the slack out of the tether and dragged himself toward the ship. His boots touched the metal. The next moment, his forward momentum sent him bouncing into the hull, and he gripped onto the airlock to stop himself from spinning out of control. Nex took a second to catch his breath. Then he disengaged the tether and lowered himself upside down, moving hand over hand across the ladder. Holding on with one hand, he reached down and tapped on the airlock's controls. The outer door slid closed, and the roaring sound of air filled his helmet. At last, the chamber reached full pressurization, and the artificial gravity returned back to normal. The inner airlock door slid open. Nex stumbled down the ladder and snapped off his helmet. It was black inside, freezing cold, and the air tasted stale, but he could breathe well enough. It would have to do. His respirator's oxygen supply was down to 4%, basically useless. He shook off the heavy EVA suit and, groping about in the darkness, found the zipper of his backpack.
We're here, DC.
The little bot rose out of the backpack into the air.
Give me some light.
DC's headlamp switched on. The piping and thick bundles of cabling threw strange shadows on the walls. The interior of the docking bay was oddly similar to the SS Horizon. The SS Endeavour carried machinery and heavy equipment. It wasn't meant for actual people. It was just a part of the follower group. That meant it was set up to be operated remotely by the lead ship, the SS Horizon. It had some defenses, but that was it. No life support, no fancy creature comforts, and just a bare minimum of temperature control to prevent damage to the equipment. Nex quickly pulled on his boots.
Let's go.
His feet crunched on a thin layer of ice as they made their way up to the bridge. Nex had this weird feeling, like he'd been here before. The SS Endeavour's layout mirrored the SS Horizon's in every detail, but this ship's darkened, empty interior, marked by the dead-eyed specters of deactivated Sentinel-32 patrol droids and defense turrets, sent a shiver through him. Nex entered the bridge. The control console screen glowed in the dark, its operating system command prompt blinking, waiting for instructions.
DC, send the distress beacon.
DC zipped over to the console. Nex bit his lip, hoping this would actually work. In a few seconds, the progress bars popped up, showing that the ship's systems were transmitting the distress signal. The message carried ship identification, coordinates, and the nature of the emergency. A beacon received notification popped up on the screen. Nex shook his fist.
We did it. We did it, DC.
His legs suddenly turned to jelly, and he fell back into a seat. The Space Authority was on its way. You've been listening to Darkcore Frontiers. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wondrous Legends. And if you like this production, you can help us make Season 2 by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/wondrouslegends. Thank you for listening.